My story started out like any other, I suppose. I had a dating profile on POF, Plenty of Fish. I had been divorced for 3 years now and thought it was time to see what was out there. I have two kids who are grown adults. When I mentioned to them I put a profile on a dating site, they both laughed and wished me good luck, but told me to be careful. When they told me this, I thought they meant to meet in a public place. I thought they were worried about me meeting a serial killer or something like that. I worried the same, to be honest. I never imagined that the real danger wasn't a serial killer or a pervert, but a scammer. I first met John Walters in August of 2017. He sent me a message that said he liked my profile picture and found me attractive. I messaged him back after taking a good look at his profile. He was 50, a widow, very handsome. I later found out the photo belonged to a model. Him and I started chatting through Messenger app on POF. He told me he'd been alone for 7 years. His wife died of breast cancer, leaving him a widow with his son, who was 12 years old at the time his mother died. His son was now 19 and going to school in the UK. John was very polite, asking why I joined the site, what brought me online, had I met anyone, and various personal questions like that. He said he worked as a gold and diamonds buyer for various companies. He was always traveling, but had a home in Texas, which is where he said he lived. He asked me about my job, and I did nothing spectacular. I worked for an auto dealership, a major one whose name I will not disclose, but let's just say the dealership I work at is well known, and we have tons of cars. It's a massive dealership, and I was in charge of the entire finance and loan department. My job paid decent. I owned my own home, owned two cars, had an excellent credit line, as I'd always been very careful. John said he loved cars and he had five of them. Wow. He worked in places like Malaysia, Japan, Africa, UK, all over the world, selling and buying gold and diamonds for his clients. When we first started talking, he was getting ready to leave for a business trip to Malaysia. He would be gone for 2 weeks. As we chatted more on the site, I would say the first time about 3 hours, he asked me for my phone number. Now, I'd always been very careful, so I was a bit reluctant at first. However, he sent me about 15 photos of himself. He even said he was sitting on the couch at home talking to me wearing a gray sweater. He then sent me a photo of a man sitting on a couch wearing a gray sweater. So I thought, okay, this guy's real. I trusted him and gave him my phone number. He didn't call me that night. He said he would call me later in the week as he had to go. He had a lot of business paperwork to attend to. I thought nothing of it and said my goodnights to him. I have to admit, it was the first time in years that a man sat and talked to me. He asked me how I feel and other questions that I had not been asked in a long time. 3 days passed before my phone rang one night. It was around 11 p.m. It was on a Friday, and I was off work the next day. Otherwise, I would have had my phone ringer turned off for sleeping. It was John. He said his name was John and he had a bit of an accent when I asked him about it. He said his mother was from Poland, his father from Italy. They made him go to a boarding school in Germany, and he lived for many years in Indonesia. So, he said he had a mix of various accents. Honestly, I thought nothing of it and found it a bit attractive. He was easy to understand, but yes, he did have a slight accent. We talked on the phone for hours. He told me about his business contacts and about his plans for the future. He said his son would be home for Christmas in Texas, and that he, John, would be finished with his contract in Malaysia by then and be home. He asked me what my plans were, and I told him I was not sure. is that it was so far away and it was still only August. But since my divorce and my kids being grown, we kind of all do our own thing for the holidays. Last year I spent Christmas with a neighbor and her family. I admitted to him I was lonely, and yes, I was. I often dedicated my life to working, coming home, sleeping, and then back to work. I found comfort in my job as I was so good at it. I loved processing loans, paperwork, helping people with their finance. It's all I've known for over 20 years. Fast forward a few days, and John was calling me almost every night. I told him my work hours and how I needed to sleep, and was normally in bed by 9 p.m., as I had to wake up at 5 a.m. to get ready for work. However, he continued calling me late into the hours, sometimes midnight, and a few times at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. I admit I was sleep deprived, but I wanted to talk to him. He said, due to his work, he could only call me late at night, when he was finished with his days and his duties and meetings. He told me about his trip to Malaysia and how he had so much to prepare for. He said he was going to be involved in a $2 million diamond contract. I felt like I was talking to such a successful man. I've never known someone who's traveled around the world for work. My ex-husband was also in banking and finance, and he was boring. We never even went on vacations to the beach or anything. And here I was, talking to a man who was jet-setted around the world, who enjoys travel, fine dining, and all the things I could only dream about doing with someone. He was the total package, and I had his attention. Lucky me, I thought. As time went on that week, John said he was still preparing for his trip. He had grown close to me, and I had grown close to him. I took my profile down off of POF at his request, and he said he did the same as he felt this connection with me and I was the one. Our conversations went to phone, onto WhatsApp, and to Google Hangouts. He said it was easier to communicate there and hardly ever went on Facebook, although he asked if he could add me on there. However, I said no, as the only people on my Facebook were my kids and very close relatives. After I told him that, he stopped asking about Facebook and said never mind. Looking back, I should have found that odd, but at the time I didn't. We talked for hours. I told him all my personal feelings, details, and yes, even talked sexual to him. We committed ourselves to a relationship. I asked him about video chatting, but he said that his phone belonged to the company and they monitor all video activity due to data usage. He said he would rather meet in person than waste time video chatting. He said he couldn't kiss a phone, but he wanted to kiss me in person. I fell for it, and I told him I couldn't wait to meet him. We planned on meeting near Christmas time in Texas. I, at the time, lived in New Hampshire, and told him I would fly down to Dallas, where he was from. He even sent me photos of his home, his swimming pool, his bedroom, his cars, everything. I was over the moon, but I was still careful. I did not tell my kids about this yet. I wanted to wait and be sure that this meeting would happen first. I only told a close coworker of mine, and she was very happy for me. A few days after being in Malaysia, he told me his contract was going well. We talked more about meeting and how much he loved me. Then, after hanging up around 1 a.m., due to me having to sleep some before work, I was woken up by a call at 4 a.m. It was John. He was crying and upset. I asked him what happened, and he said he was beaten and robbed on his way back from the hotel from a business meeting. My heart broke. I heard him say that they held a gun to his head and they beat him. I was lost, confused, and scared. He told me the taxi driver was involved in the robbery and he needed to get to a hospital but had no money to pay for a driver. I was in a panic. I didn't know what to do. He asked me for $100 to pay for a driver for a fare. He said the driver would accept a Western Union. I'd used Western Union before online to send relatives money, so I had an online account. I woke up and rushed to my computer. I took down the information and sent this so-called driver $100 for the fare. John thanked me and hung up. He said he would call me when he was at the hospital. I stayed awake, got ready for work, and heard nothing from John until late that evening. The entire day I was worried sick. When he called, he said that he had some broken ribs and a concussion and a cut above his head. He even sent me photos of a man's head with a cut on it. It looked like John's hair, but at the same time, I didn't question it. He said the robbers took his credit cards, money, company funds he had in his briefcase. He was sleeping in a park as the hotel would not allow him to come back to the room as it was not paid for due to his credit card being used and maxed out by the robbers. He said he was scared and alone. I urged him to call his company and let them know what happened. But he said he couldn't do that because his coworker would make fun of him for getting robbed, and his bosses would think he was incompetent and remove him from the contracts. He was set to make millions. He asked me if I would be able to pay for his hotel for 1 week while he was in Malaysia. He planned on finishing the contract and would pay me back double for what I paid for the hotel. I was reluctant at first, but then he told me he was sleeping in the street. He would lose everything and kill himself. He asked me for $2,000. He said I could pay the hotel manager and even gave me the phone number to this hotel manager's personal office. I called and spoke to this manager. The person even answered the phone with the hotel name, saying he was indeed the manager. He assured me if I was to Western Union the money, John's room would be held and he could stay for the remainder of his trip. I sent the money to the hotel manager, $2,000. John called me later that night to thank me. He said he's never met a woman like me and wants to marry me when he returns home from his business trip. I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. I thought he was making a joke, but he said he felt in his heart we were meant to be. I accepted his proposal. He then asked me for my address as he had a surprise for me. I gave it to him. The next night, I got home from work late. I had my phone in my purse at work as we were having some big managers in from corporate office, and we were not allowed to have our phones out during working hours or at our desk. When I finally got home, I looked at my phone and had over 30 missed calls on Hangout app and tons of text messages on WhatsApp from John asking where I was, telling me that I was cheating, I was a whore, asking who the man was, who I was with, and all sorts of crazy stuff. I finally texted him back and told him I was working late and the big bosses were in, so I couldn't have my phone. He told me I need to be available all hours of the day and night, and if I cared about him and loved him, I would be there when he needed me for whatever reason. I apologized to him and begged him to forgive me. He did and told me he'd never met a woman like me before and was scared that he would lose me forever and lose all of my love. We spent the next couple of hours talking. We even had some adult sexual talk, and he talked me into taking some photos of myself that I normally wouldn't send to anyone. I didn't want to at first, but he said if I loved him, I would. He even sent me some naked photos. I later found out they were stolen from a porn site. So, I sent 4 pictures of myself. At first, it was just my breast, but then he wanted my face in the photos and other parts of me in the photos. So I did it. I felt like a silly teenager. It didn't feel right. Another day went on, and again I had to work another late night. This time I told him I was working late, and he asked if I'd eaten, how I was feeling, and I told him I didn't have time to cook dinner yet. The next thing I knew, there was a knock at my door. In about 30 minutes, it was Dine Dash delivery driver with a bunch of Chinese food that was ordered from my local restaurant. John had bought me dinner. I was shocked and felt so loved. I enjoyed and had enough food to last me for lunch tomorrow and dinner the next night. It was enough for a family of 4. I felt so loved and wanted. I felt cared about. John said that he knew I worked late, he knew I would be tired, and he wanted to surprise me with dinner. He said his contract was going well, and he only had 2 more days in Malaysia. We talked each night on the phone and in Hangouts. He would not be able to video chat, but I did. He would often bring sex into the conversation. and have me do sexy things while on video chat. I felt a bit ashamed, but I did it anyways. I wanted him to feel good. The last day he was to be in Malaysia, I was busy at work all day. I spoke to him on my lunch break, but then had to return to work. My phone kept buzzing continuously, so while processing paperwork at my desk, I answered. It was John. He was angry, yelling. He said his business contract fell through and that he was outbid by a dirty client from another company. He was so angry and upset, he said he would lose his job and everything if he wasn't able to send the workers their fair share of money, and he was afraid they would beat him up. I didn't know what to say or do. I've never seen him angry. He asked me if I would be able to send $5,000 to the accounts manager so his workers would at least be paid for their work. Otherwise, he could face losing his job and the workers coming after him. I was shocked. He asked, but he seemed so worried. $5,000 is a lot of money, and I didn't have that kind of money on hand. I told him, and he asked me if I had anything I could sell, that he would pay me back when he returned from his disaster of a business trip. I somehow believed his words and told him I would find a way to send the money. He gave me the name of his company worker who would distribute the money to the workers. The next morning, I found myself at the pawn shop. I pawned my old wedding ring, my grandmother's ring, and some personal jewelry. I ended up getting about 5,600 some odd dollars for everything on loan. I texted John and told him how much I had gotten. He asked me to send the entire $5,600. I asked him why. He only needed 5,000 to pay for his workers. He then told me he had a problem that evening with his airline ticket home due to his credit card being stolen and not to worry that he would pay me back. Despite the little money in my pocket and the money I got from the pawn shop and the little voice in my head telling me not to, I did it anyways. I wired 3 payments over Western Union to the so-called company accounting boss in Malaysia. Even the little extra money I had, I sent to him, including the Western Union fees to send so much money. It was over $200. John told me that his accounting boss would take care of everything. I was far in debt at this point, and too vested in this relationship. During his time in Malaysia, he also asked me for iTunes cards. I bought 2 of them at $100 each. He said his phone service wouldn't work without them. He made me feel guilty. He said I was the reason why he needed the iTunes cards, because he spoke to me on Hangouts and it took money off of his phone. John said he was flying home that Saturday and would call me when he got back to Texas. I waited and heard nothing. Then, on Sunday night, like clockwork, at 2 a.m., he phoned me to tell me he was home. He said his flights were delayed, and I never asked him for his flight number, so I thought nothing of it. He said he was tired and needed to rest a few days. He would contact me soon. I told him I understood. A few more days went by, and then John called me. He said he was very tired, but feeling better. He asked me if it would be okay if he paid me the money he owed me in December when I came to visit. That he wanted me to get triple my money back. I told him he didn't have to do that. I just needed what was owed minus the fee for the Western Union. I told him, don't even worry about the fee, just get the money back that I loaned you. But he insisted. He said he wanted to make 3 times the payments back to me. I told him I could make the payments on the loan to the pawn shop, but he had to have that money by December. His voice and words reassured me, and I believed him. We were back to talking like we did before, sharing stories, romantic sexual nights, busy work days, and much love. He even sent roses to my workplace. In all the years I was married, I never got roses. The girls in the office were all so jealous. Time moved forward. Days turned into weeks, and I was head over heels in love with this man. Then, one day, John asked me about my job. He wanted the details of what I did for a living. He knew I worked in auto finance, but I never went into all the graphic details of my job, the paper pushing, etc. It was just boring to be honest, and not worth talking about. So, one night, I told him. He asked me what kind of people get loans, what kind of information do I use, work passwords, and strange questions. I thought it was strange, but he worked in software and finance and computers, as well as his selling of diamonds and gold. He had lots of clients online. I figured maybe he just wanted to know about my software. He then asked me one day, while I was at work, if I could open a Gmail account for him. He said he was locked out of his account and had trouble opening one due to his work data or some issue with his computer. I thought nothing of it and opened a Gmail account for him on my work computer. Gave him the password, and he told me to stay logged in while he checked to make sure it worked. So I didn't log out and lose the password. So I told him to go ahead, do what he needs to do. I was going to lunch. I was starving. I was busy at work. He was excited at the prospect and told me he would call me later that night and that he had some business to attend to soon. I went to lunch, and when I returned, my computer was frozen. It said Windows had to restart, blah, blah, blah. I'm not really sure. I've never been really great with this tech stuff. I went home, and John and I talked again. Our usual conversation, but he told me he had exciting news. He said a client of his from a jewelry and gold company was starting a delivery business. He asked if I would be interested in working part-time for him, and also I could keep some of the jewelry for myself. I was hesitant. I told him my job now was very demanding, but he told me it was simple. The contract company would mail me jewelry, and I was to ship it forward to clients in Africa. I could also keep a third of the items ordered. He also said clients would send me money via Western Union to pay for the shipping. He talked about wanting to get into this business and get it off the ground so that when we're together and we get married, we can have our own established jewelry shipping business. The prospect of marriage sent my heart over the moon, so I wanted to do this. I agreed. It took about 5 days before the first package arrived at my door. It was a couple of $200 rings. The name on the invoice was Gold Limited, LLC, and it came as a gift package. The only reason I knew is because the invoice said happy birthday and had the price for a return receipt or credit. I got about 4 packages that week filled with various jewelry, bracelets, etc., all of them marked as a gift package. John gave me instructions to mail them via DHL to a business in Nigeria. I did so. The next day, he gave me an MTCN and asked me to pick up $300 from a woman in Florida. He said she was a client paying for the shipping of goods. So I picked it up. It only cost me around $100 to ship the jewelry, and John said for me to keep the remainder of the money for my troubles. This continued for weeks, and soon I found myself shipping boxes daily. Getting boxes every day. My front porch looked like a drop-off zone for packages. I would get home from work and find 10 or more packages at my door. It almost became too much. I told John I was losing sleep between talking to him all night, working my day job, and spending my evenings unboxing and boxing jewelry and then shipping them, and then picking up Western Union and MoneyGram as well as Walmart to Walmart transfers from these so-called clients. I was exhausted and hardly spoke to my family. When I told John I was going to spend the weekend at a barbecue with my kids and family, he became enraged and told me they were trying to tear us apart. The truth was, I hadn't told them much about him, per his request, because he wanted to surprise them at Christmas time, which was only now a month away. I went to the barbecue, but John and I had a huge fight before, and I ended up leaving the barbecue early and coming home to sleep. I was so tired physically and emotionally. I hardly slept an hour before my phone started buzzing, binging, and ringing. Texts and calls from Hangouts, WhatsApp, rings from unknown Nigerian phone numbers. I finally turned off my phone. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed sleep. I slept all night. The next morning, I woke to over 100 missed calls, text, and voice messages, all from John and various unknown and Nigerian area-coded phone numbers. He made threats to me, told me I better answer my phone. I had money to pick up and packages to ship. He called me a scammer for not answering the phone. I told him I fell asleep, I'm exhausted. And he told me that we can't make money while we sleep. He was cruel and demanding. I'd never seen this side of him. I ended up getting ready for work. I told him I would talk to him tonight after work, once he's calmed down. When I arrived at work, my boss called me into his office. He was sitting there with two detectives from my local police department. I was asked for my work badge, my login details, and I was placed on an unpaid leave. My boss told me that several auto clients of ours have had their social security numbers, banking information stolen and used. Some of the information was used to open credit accounts, as well as clients' credit cards on file, as we kept some of that information for debit cards for loan customers, was used to purchase online goods that were shipped to my home. I was horrified. I started crying. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The police detective told me they were launching an investigation and things did not look good. I explained to them how I was shipping goods for John, and the detective asked for his information. I gave him his name, date of birth, phone numbers, company, and so on. They came back empty handed and said no person with that name, date of birth existed, neither did the company. They told me the phone number was a Google Voice number, and I better prepare myself and possibly hire an attorney as I would be facing possible fraud charges. They thought I gave John all that information from our clients to commit fraud. I didn't, and I was innocent. I drove home in a rage, panic. I was crying, angry, scared. I contacted John, and he told me I was crazy and not to make threats to him. I told him I know what he did. I would not be going to jail over his fraud. He then said something to me that shook me to my core. He told me the purchases all led to my computer, my login details. He told me to play by the rules or we'd make sure I got locked up in jail for life. He then told me he obtained all my coworkers' information, emails, social security, social media profiles, and he was going to send photos and video of me he recorded during our sex chats. He told me I had 48 hours to come up with $15,000 or he would release all the videos to my family and friends, my boss, and my coworkers. He started naming them all off and showing me their Facebook and other Instagram social media profiles. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. The prospect of going to jail over something I didn't know or didn't do illegally, and then to be humiliated on top of it, I thought of suicide. I thought of anything to end it all. John laughed and called me a whore. He gave me 48 hours to come up with the money. I begged him. I didn't have that kind of money. He told me to sell my body in the streets, do whatever I had to do, but he warned he wanted the money sent to a bank account in Nigeria and it better show up or else. I felt gutted and empty. I decided I had to pay him. So I took both my cars, sold them to an auto trader for half their worth. It gave me $15,000. I then deposited it into my bank account and wired the money to the Nigerian bank account he gave me. John texted me that he got the money, and then he demanded $5,000 more, or he would still show my photos to my boss and tell my boss that he knew about the fraud and that I begged him to use the details, to use the client's social security numbers and account because I was in debt. And he said he would lie to my boss and tell my boss I had to pawn everything and sell my cars to make ends meet and that I did this because I was desperate. I collapsed and started bawling my eyes out. I didn't have the means to get another $5,000 and now I was without a car. I was walking, taking the bus. I lost everything. I didn't know what to do. So, in desperation, I went online and took out a loan against my home. The money would be in my account in 5 to 7 days. John said that wasn't good enough, and he wanted the money right now, or he would turn me into the whore that I am and show everyone my videos and photos. I ended up going to 3 different payday loan companies. I made him promise that if I paid him this money, he would delete my pictures and video. He said he would, and he made me wire the money to a bank in Nigeria again. I didn't hear any more from John, and a few more packages came to my home, but I returned them to the mailman. That Monday, I met with a detective to go over everything. They said my computer had an extension attachment via an IP out of Nigeria. So basically, when I opened that Gmail for him and left it open, he attached himself to my computer and took all the information I had. So they can see what happened. Thankfully, I wouldn't be on the hook for giving the information. However, I was in trouble for shipping the packages. I explained my entire situation to the police. I gave them all of John's information, but they knew it was all false. I also gave them the names of the Nigerians, the bank account in Nigeria, the Nigerian in Malaysia that I sent money to, and the so-called company in Nigeria where I shipped packages to. Long story short, it was a group, a family of Nigerian scammers working together, and John was a 23-year-old Nigerian man named Michael. All the money I sent and wired to Nigeria and Malaysia was sent to all family members of his, including his mother, sisters, his two brothers, who he lived and worked in Malaysia with at the time. I had been played a fool and lost everything. I was fired from my job for using company time and equipment to open a Gmail account, putting clients' information at risk. I'm involved in a lawsuit now from some of the victims of identity theft. The Western Unions I picked up the money from were from other victims. This Michael in Nigeria romanced. One lady sent me money thinking I was the nanny for a man she met online for his son who was sick. The scammer had many fake profiles online and would use victims against each other for different reasons. Another woman in Nevada who sent me nearly $500 thought I was a leave agent for the military to process her so-called online soldier's leave form. The more that unraveled, the sicker I became. I ended up having to go to the hospital for a mental breakdown. I lost my jewelry I pawned. I lost 2 cars. I was unable to pay back the loan against my home, resulting in a foreclosure of my home. I was unable to pay the payday loans as well. My credit is completely ruined. As I write this, I am now only working part-time. I'm living in a family member's rental room until I can get back on my feet. I'm awaiting court dates, but will only face lawsuits from people, and the charges were dropped by the state as they could see I was innocent. I was the victim of a scam. As for John, his POF profile is gone. The WhatsApp profile and Hangouts is abandoned, but the 23-year-old Nigerian has a Facebook page. The man who scammed me. He's wearing a ring I shipped to Nigeria on his finger in one of the photos in his album. I would like to smack the stupid off his face. I'm suffering. I've lost everything, and I will never date online again. I can at least say, though, I'm not a scammer like Michael. He has to face a bigger wrath than just the people on earth he's used and hurt. Thank you for letting me tell my story. And we thank you for telling your story. This is a little bit of an unusual story. We do have victims that lose everything, and sadly, scammers don't care. This Michael in Nigeria is probably continuing to scam and use other people online. If you have a story you'd like told, you can remain anonymous. You can find us on Facebook under Scamming Scammers Action. I'll be happy to narrate your story. If you need any help, also, you can find our inbox on Facebook, Scamming Scammers Action. Thanks for listening. Be safe out there. Take care. And remember, doing something as innocent as opening a Gmail account from someone can lead you into a whole world of trouble. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.